Hi, kids. So I went to school today, and if you don't know, the teachers have been put on a rotation. So we're actually not even supposed to be there. So my day to go to school is Monday and then a week from today. But I had to run in this morning and get a few things. And while I was there, I thought about grabbing our book that we're reading. Remember, we're reading The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. And so I thought, who knows when we're coming back to school, but I have been thinking about this book and wondering whatever happens to Edward. So I thought you guys might like listening to a little bit of it. I'm not going to read a lot, maybe a chapter or two per video. If you don't want to watch it, that's totally fine if you do. And then we can figure out whatever happens to Edward if he ever makes it back to Abilene. But I hope all you guys are doing good. I miss you guys. Being home kind of is boring. I don't like just sitting in front of a computer waiting to hear from you guys or answer emails. I'd much rather be in the classroom with you guys telling you to be quiet or put your name on your paper or reminding you this is where we need to be. No goofing off. But anyway, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do for our Fun Friday activity. But anyway, okay, so do you remember up to this point, Edward had been with the hobo, and he was, we figure, 5 or 6 years, or even 7 years, and then the lady found him along the side of the tracks and made him into kind of a scarecrow, and then the little boy started talking to him and decided to go back and get him. So we are in chapter 17. And here we go. Bryce slung Edward over his shoulder. He started to walk. I come to get you for Sarah Ruth, Bryce said. You don't know Sarah Ruth? She's my sister. She's sick. She had her baby doll made out of china. She loved that baby doll, but he broke it. He broke it? He was drunk and stepped on that baby's head and smashed it into 100 million pieces. Them pieces were so small I couldn't make them go back together. I couldn't. I tried and tried. At this point in his story, Bryce stopped walking and shook his head and wiped out his nose with the back of his hand. Sarah Ruth ain't had nothing to play with since. He won't buy her nothing. He says she don't need nothing. He says she don't need nothing because she ain't gonna live. But he don't know. Bryce started to walk again. He don't know, he said. Who he was not clear to Edward. What was clear was that he was being taken to a child to make up for the loss of a doll. A doll. How Edward loathed dolls. And to be thought of as a likely replacement for a doll offended him. But still, it was, he had to admit, a highly preferable alternative to hanging by his ears from a post. The house in which Bryce and Sarah Ruth lived was so small and crooked that Edward did not believe at first that it was a house. He mistook it instead for a chicken coop. Inside there were 2 beds and a kerosene lamp and not much else. Bryce laid Edward at the foot of one of the beds and then lit the lamp. Sarah, Bryce whispered. Shh, sorry, that was Spencer. Sarah Ruth, you gotta wake up now, honey. I brung you something. He took the harmonica out of his pocket and played the beginning of a simple melody. The little girl sat up in bed and immediately started to cough. Bryce put his hand on her back. That's all right, he told her. That's okay. She was young, maybe 4 years old, and she had white blonde hair, and even in the poor light of the lamp, Edward could see that her eyes were the same gold-flecked brown as Bryce's. That's right, said Bryce. You go on ahead and cough. Sarah Ruth obliged him. She coughed and coughed and coughed. On the wall of the cabin, the kerosene light cast her trembling shadow, hunched over and small. The coughing was the saddest sound that Edward had ever heard, sadder even than the mournful call of the whippoorwill. Finally, Sarah Ruth stopped. Bryce, she said, you want to see what I brung you? Sarah Ruth nodded. You gotta close your eyes. The girl closed her eyes. Bryce picked up Edward and held him so that he was standing straight like a soldier at the end of the bed. All right now, you can open them. Sarah Ruth opened her eyes, and Bryce moved Edward's china legs and china arms so it looked as if he were dancing. Sarah Ruth laughed and clapped her hands. "Rabbit," she said. "He's for you, honey," said Bryce. Sarah Ruth looked first at Edward, then at Bryce, and then back at Edward again, her eyes wide and disbelieving. Oh, her eyes were wide and disbelieving. "He's yours." "Mine?" Sarah Ruth Edward was soon to discover rarely said more than one word at a time. Words, at least several of them strung together, made her cough. She limited herself. She said only what needed to be said. "Yours," said Bryce. "I got him special for you." This knowledge provoked another fit of coughing in Sarah Ruth, and she hunched over again. When the fit was done, she uncurled herself and held out her arms. "That's right," said Bruce. He handed Edward to her. "Baby," said Sarah Ruth. She rocked Edward back and forth and stared down at him and smiled. Never in his life had Edward ever been cradled like a baby. You see the picture? Okay. Abilene had not done it, nor had Nellie, and most certainly Bull had not. It was a singular sensation to be held so gently and yet so fiercely, to be stared down at with so much love. Edward felt the whole of his china body flood with warmth. "You gonna give him a name, honey?" Bryce said. "Jangles," said Sarah Ruth, without taking her eyes off of Edward. "Jangles, huh? That's a good name. I like that name." Bryce patted Sarah Ruth on the head. She continued to stare down at Edward. "Hush," she said to Edward as she rocked him back and forth. "From the minute I first see him," said Bryce, "I knew he belonged to you. I said to myself, that rabbit is for Sarah Ruth, for sure." "Jangles," murmured Sarah Ruth. Outside the cabin thunder cracked, and then came the sound of rain falling on the tin roof. Sarah Ruth rocked Edward back and forth, and Bryce took out his harmonica and started to play, making his song rhythm with the rain. All right, guys. Next one, chapter 18. I'm going to end it because you're probably getting antsy. See, right now I'd say, okay, finish your cursive or set it aside. Let's get out our language arts. But right now, maybe you can go out to recess or go play with your brother or sister. So hopefully you guys are doing okay. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.